welcome back, Algebra 1B students. We're doing our warm-up number 3, just to practice something that's going to come up later in topic 3 when we do something called factoring trinomials. So just a reminder that when we were looking for these things we call factors, factors are numbers that divide nicely into another number, into a given number. So number 1 here, when we're trying to find all the factors of negative 15, we want to divide nicely into negative 15. I'll just say divide into negative 15. So we can do a t-chart, what I call a factor t-chart. And we can always start with 1, and it turns out if you've been following these, you remember that it's always going to be 1 and the number, so 1 and negative 15. But if you forget, you can divide. You can say, hey, let's take negative 15 and let's divide by 1. But that is going to give us a negative 15. So you can always start with 1 and the number. 1's a factor and negative 15 is a factor. 1's always a factor of the number, and the number is always a factor of itself. Remember that we also, with positive 1 in there, we also get negative 1. So it would be a negative 1, and you'd match it up with a positive 15. If we try 2, 2 is not going to work out. Negative 15 divided by 2 is negative 7.5. I go, no decimals here. So 2 is not a factor, but I checked. I'm doing an organized guess and check. Negative 2 is also out. But what about 3? Well, you might know, but you can check. If you calculate negative 15 divided by 3, that comes out to negative 5. And then we also, we also get a negative 3. So 3 and negative 5, we also get a negative 3 that would go along with a positive 5. And again, you can check negative 15 divided by a negative 3. All right, 1, 2 didn't work. 3, how about 4? You might already know 4 is not a factor of negative 15. You do negative 15 divided by 4, you get, I think it's negative 3.75. I know it's decimal, so I go, no decimals. Negative 4 would also be out, and then we'd be on to 5, but I go, hey, 5 is already on the other side. So we've rounded out. We're done except for listing the factors. So our answer here to number 1, all the factors, we'd have 1, negative 1, 3, negative 3, 5, negative 5, 15, and negative 15. And that's it. Those are all the factors. Number 2, we want to divide nicely now into 20. So I can use the same process here. And again, if you're learning that shortcut, it'd be 1 in the number, but we can say 1 times what gives you 20, or what's 20 divided by 1. Okay, so 1 is always a factor of a number, and the number is always a factor of itself. If you've got a positive 1, you also get a negative 1. That would match up with a negative 20. 2, you might know, 2 matches up with 10, but you can do 20 divided by 2. If you weren't sure, that would give you the 10. If you get a positive 2, you also get a negative 2. That match up with a negative 10. 3 is not going to be a factor, but you can try if you're not sure. 20 divided by 3 gives you a decimal. That gives you, I think it's 6.6 repeating. So no decimals. Negative 3 is also out. 1, 2, 3, 4. You probably know that 4 times 5, but we can crunch the numbers just in case. 20 divided by 4, that would give you a 5. And so 4 is a factor, 5 is a factor, and if you get a positive 4 as a factor, you also get a negative 4 as a factor, and that would match up with a negative 5. So 1, 2, 3 wasn't a factor, 4, 5. 5 is already on the list. It's our lucky number on this one. That was the round out number on both of them. That's a coincidence. Sometimes we got to go past 5. But yeah, the only other thing is to just list all of these for my answer. So all the factors of 20, we have 1, negative 1, 2, negative 2, 3 was not a factor, but 4, negative 4, 5, negative 5. Ooh, am I going to be able to squeeze these all in? 10 and negative 10, and then 20 and negative 20. Wow, if I can squeeze that in there. Okay. So that's all the factors of 20, all the integer factors. So again, if you've been following along with these warm-ups, you know that questions 3 and 4, we can use our work from 1 or 2 or both of them to help us with these. So number 3, we're looking for a product of negative 15. We want to multiply to get to negative 15. I go, well, hey, those are the pairs of numbers we had back on number 1. The sum of negative 14 we want to add to negative 14. So I go, well, we haven't done that yet. Well, let's take a look. If I take all these pairs of numbers, if I go back to number 1 and I look at the sums, if I add these, we're going for a sum of negative 14, and it just so happens it's the very first pair of numbers we have. If you take the positive 1 and you add the negative 15, you get negative 14. So I can stop. That's my answer. My numbers are 1 and negative 15. They have a product of negative 15. They have a sum of negative 14. In the problems that we're previewing here, sometimes we'll want a different sum. But usually it's what other numbers for the product. For number 4, we're going back to the 20. So that is problem number 2. So product of 20, that's problem number 2. Sum of negative 12. All right, so if I check out the sums of these pairs over here, let's see here. 1 plus 20, 1 and 20 multiply to positive 20, but they add to 21. Okay, not my numbers. I'm looking for the sum of negative 12. If I make it negative 1 plus negative 20, that just changes my sum to a negative 21. I'm looking for a negative 12. By the way, remember, I think I've said it before, but you might spot the numbers in the list, and you might not have to do all this writing, and that'd be great. Wouldn't that be great? But I'm just going to do the process here. So 2 plus 10 is my next pair of numbers. 2 times 10 is 20. 2 plus 10 is 12. Ooh, so close. I don't want 12. I want negative 12. So that's going to be the next pair. Negative 2 plus negative 10. That gives me the negative 12. So those are our winning numbers there, negative 2 and negative 10. So if you want to stick around in this video, I'll show you how we're going to apply this later in topic 3. I did this in the second video also. I didn't do it in the first video, I don't think. So here's how it's going to look later on in topic 3. We're gonna do what's called factoring. It's gonna be something like x squared minus 14x minus 15. We're gonna have to do something called factoring of that. Here, factor is a verb. The noun factor is something that divides nicely into another number, but the verb factor means to write as multiplication. And so what we're gonna learn when we do this is we're gonna have 2 sets of parentheses, and we're gonna start each set of parentheses with just x. But we're going to fill in numbers, one number in each set of parentheses. And then the question is, what are the numbers? Well, the trick is that we want a sum of negative 14, and we want a product of negative 15. Well, that's what we discovered in number 3. We said, what 2 numbers have a sum of negative 14 and a product of negative 15? We said it was 1 and negative 15. So all we're going to do is we're going to take these numbers and we're going to say, all right, it's a positive 1 and it's a negative 15. And that's going to be our answer when we factor this. But the trick comes down to recognizing that negative 14, we want 2 numbers that add to negative 14, and the negative 15, we want 2 numbers that multiply. So sometimes you just know the numbers, but if you don't, all the process that we've done there is a process you can go through. Number 4, what this would look like later on in topic 3 is we would be asked to factor an expression like x squared minus 12x plus 20. And again, we would have 2 sets of parentheses. We would start each set of parentheses with just x, not x squared, just x. But looking at this trinomial, we say, hey, we want a sum of negative 12. The numbers that are going to go in my parentheses, those 2 numbers need a sum of negative 12, and the same 2 numbers need a product of 20. So what are those numbers? Well, we've already found them. It's negative 2 and negative 10. So that's all you have to do is we just go, all right, let's put in negative 2 and a negative 10. And we have factored. So remember, if you're watching this, if you're following along in class and you're like, what the heck is going on with the x minus 2 and the x minus 10, it's something we'll get to later on in class. So But it's just, again, to kind of front load, to get you prepared for this process, to say, how do you find all the factors of negative 15? How do you find all the factors of 20? And then, okay, now let's use that work to say, what if we want to multiply to negative 15, but we want to add to this number? Or we want to multiply that number and add to this other number. It's just a process to go through. So thanks for watching the video. I hope it was helpful, and we'll see you next time.